to wait a minute for her. I'll kind of welcome everybody. Okay, guys, I'm going to talk for a second so everyone, just make sure since we're going to be on Zoom recording, you guys can be quietly working and stuff, but just do it quietly, but I'm going to welcome everybody right now. Welcome everyone. This is Ms. Taylor welcoming you to our first senior thesis presentation. Fiona will start in just 1 minute. We're waiting for her mom to arrive to the Zoom meeting, and she will be presenting on influences on adolescence. We'll give her a good hand while we're waiting for Nicole. The schedule for today has had a minor change. Fiona's going to go in just 1 minute. Then Anna's going to go at 1:55 and Cheyenne at 2:20. Tomorrow, we will have just 2 presentations. Andrea at 11:35 and Jaden at 11:50. Check and see if Nicole's here yet. What's your volume? Is she having trouble or is she good? I sent it to Nicole and you did it.
I sent it to her. And I texted it to her, so.
Okay. Well, should we wait or? No, it's okay. I can just do it. Yeah. Yeah. Here's will pop in just a minute.
We're saving it for it.
All right.
During the transition out of childhood, adolescents are influenced greatly by family, friends, and the school environment. There are some negative aspects and there are some positive aspects. Some negative being a lack of parental communication and presence, peer pressure and peer presence, and bullying in schools, and some positive being supportive and communicative parents, positive peer influence, and supportive mentors and teachers at school. Parents play a huge role in the development of adolescents. Communication is important and enforces a strong and positive foundation in the parent-child relationship. When communication is not encouraged or neglected, the family does not function in a way that is supportive and understanding. High levels of family conflict, poor communication skills disrupt parenting and family relations, reduce children's emotional security, and reinforce the use of aggression and interpersonal hostility. When there's a lack of communication in the family, children are then led to falsely believe that communication in any relationship is unimportant. Some effects of this lack of communication are low self-esteem, and sometimes children don't know how to cope with certain feelings. These are all short-term effects though. Some long-term effects of this lack of communication can also affect adolescents in the long term, including expectations for future relationships, and in the relationship, how conflict is handled. Along with the long-term effects of how children act in their future relationships, children also judge their parents' parenting styles and use them as examples for how they want to parent their children in the future. They judge whether their parents are too lenient or too strict, and they tend to do the opposite. For example, if a child thinks their parents are too strict, they have the goal with parenting with more leniency, which will then likely lead to too much leniency and ultimately lead to a stricter style of parenting. We learn from our parents and we judge what we like and what we don't like about how they parent, and we make decisions on how we want to parent our children based on our judgments. Along with this, the child who is chastised and punished regularly will be less anxious than the child who doesn't know when he or she will be chastised or punished. When parents are unclear on their rules or regulations or expectations, or they change their opinions and rules regularly, children are unsure of what to expect from them, and therefore they're more anxious. Parents can influence the behavior of adolescents and affect them in negative ways, but so can friends and peers. Risky behaviors are more likely to occur when teens are with their friends. They're 4 times more likely to crash a car, they're more likely to commit crimes, and they're more likely to take their first sips of alcohol or experiment with drugs. Although many may think this increase in risky behaviors when teens are with their friends is because of peer pressure, it is instead peer presence. Psychology professor Lawrence Steinberg conducted an experiment to test this. He had teens play a driving video game. In the game, teens would have to make decisions, trying to complete a course with and without their friends watching them. When the teens were alone, they didn't take any risks, and they drove with caution. But when their friends were watching, the teens took more risks.
Alex is deciding whether to put speed ahead of safety while he's alone in the scanner. But that, as far as Alex believes, is about to change.
Hey Alex, how you doing? I have your friends here, and they're gonna be watching you play the next round of tasks, so they're gonna talk to you a little bit, okay? Alright, we'll just pass that button.
Hey Alex, you still alive in there?
Oh yeah.
Nice.
Hey Alex, it's Paul. How's it going? I'm good, man. Good luck in there. We're gonna be watching you.
We're gonna be watching me.
Actually, they won't. But Alex doesn't know that. As far as he's concerned, his friends are watching his every choice. Crash. Bang. Is it my imagination, or is he having a few more crashes this time?
No, he is having more crashes, and that's what we find, that when adolescents play this game, they crash more often when they know their friends are watching them than they do when they're by themselves.
What happens?
In this experiment, when teens played this game alone, they didn't take any risks, driving with caution. Meanwhile, when they knew their friends were present and watching them, they took lots of risks and crashed this virtual car more often. This is a video game, but it reflects the real life of a teenager, proving the statistics of crashing cars, committing crimes, drinking, and experimenting drugs when with their friends. This peer presence can affect the safety of teens and their peers and friends who are present. Another study done to test this included a group of mice and their peers, and their consumption of alcohol during the adolescent and adult stages of life. Groups of mice were placed into peer groups and brought up together. They were then given alcohol and tested on how much they consumed through their stages of life. When the mice were adolescents, about 30 days old, they were tested in a group and individually. And then when they were adults, about 80 days old, they were tested in the same manner. These were the results.
Because what we find is that adolescent mice, when they are with their friends, drink more than when they are by themselves. But adult mice drink the same amount, whether they're by themselves or with their friends. So this impact of peers on the brain of humans may be something that has been conserved across species.
The consumption of alcohol triggers the reward system in the brain, and this accepting and rewarding feeling is greater when these mice and us are with our friends. There's something about the brain during adolescence in mammals that is hardwired to be especially sensitive to peer influence and to be more reward-seeking in the presence of peers. This seeking for reward and acceptance is important to adolescents. This also ties into the idea that risky behaviors that teens take part in don't necessarily have to be adopted, but merely deemed acceptable by the peer group. This knowledge and mutual understanding that peers respect and accept them does not develop after the teen has been pressured into doing something, but instead more often develops due to the fact that the behavior is accepted. Social learning theory suggests that it is not necessary for adolescents to observe a given behavior and adopt it. It is sufficient to perceive that the peer group accepts it in order to be able to opt for similar behaviors. An example of this is the video game car experiment. The teens didn't have to see or watch their friends taking risks in the game. Instead, only knowing that their friends would be watching them is what drove them to taking these risks. Parents and peers can negatively affect and influence adolescents in a negative way, but schools can also play a part in this as well. Apart from the educational aspect of school, the social environment and construct is the most impactful. When this environment is negative, adolescents' mental health and stability will be affected. The like or dislike of school is important because the majority of kids' lives are spent there. This time at school is sometimes not enjoyed because either a lack of friends, bullying, or both. Kids without friends are more likely to be bullied than those who do. And this might be true, but those who don't have friends are more likely to be bullied, but it can also be possible that those who are bullied don't have friends. Meaning, kids who don't have friends are easier to approach and pick on, but those who are bullied might be harder to approach and won't make any friends because they're seen as weak and vulnerable. It might be true that those who don't have friends are more likely to be bullied, but this does not mean that those who don't have friends aren't bullied. National surveys indicate that 70% of middle school and high school students have reported that they have been bullied at some point. And if 70% of these teens have been bullied, this shows that even with friends, teens can still be victims. Bullying is a problem and important to think about because although academics and the educational aspect of school should be prioritized, it has been shown that young people are more concerned about emotional maltreatment than anything else. Peers not only can affect the behavior of teens, but can affect their lives, their self-esteem, and lives at school. Not only does bullying affect adolescents' behavior in schools, but the adults at schools can play a part as well. Public schools tend to segregate kids, depending on their behaviors, grouping deviant kids together, creating a less supportive environment. Take, for example, in-school suspension. Teens are usually grouped with those who are similar to them. A study done in North Carolina showed that 6th graders placed in in-school suspension had twice the risk of being suspended for drug use the next year. Not casting blame, but this simply shows that kids segregated into groups based on behavior won't improve their behavior. This might be true, but it is also true that kids work better with their friends in class as opposed to when separated. Lydia Dunworth from The Atlantic said, "It is really interesting that we as adults in this society often regard friendships as a nuisance and a distraction rather than give them the value that they really deserve. In classrooms, friends are separated as a thought to lessen distraction, but the truth is that kids work better when with their friends. Although this contradicts the idea that if teens who participate in risky behaviors are grouped together, they will continue or increase their behavior, the aspect of friendship is crucial in and out of the classroom." Family, peers, and schools can affect adolescents in a negative manner, but they can also be extremely impactful in a positive way. Despite the many negative effects that can come from a lack of parental communication, there are many positive effects communication can have. With communication, a teen can become less susceptible to negative peer influence and have a higher self-esteem and chance of not taking part in risky behaviors. And parents and teens tend to feel more comfortable with each other. Therefore, the family unit is happier. Kids look up to their parents and use their parents' lives as an example of how they should or should not live their lives. Parents informed by self-disclosure. By personal history they share, they give lessons from their own life experience. Kids listen to their parents and use their life experiences to evaluate how they want to live. Taking mental notes on how their parents are can help a child decide how they want to be. An example of this is parents who spend more time with their friends are more likely to have kids with lots of healthy friendships. When parents show that friendship is a two-way relationship, their children learn how relationships should be for the present and the future. Parents who share their lives and who are open about their past and their social lives have kids who have a better idea of how to live their lives and how to interact with friends and others. Negative peer influence and peer pressure do exist, but they're not always present. Friends can influence adolescents in positive ways. They can lead to a more positive life for the adolescents. For teens, Friends are like personal support groups, where information is shared, different values, roles, and identities are experimented with. Peer groups, for the most part, are a place of acceptance and care, especially for those teens that don't have positive family relationships. Also important to understand that during the time period between childhood and adulthood, parents have less of an impact. Friends become more influential, including being able to help with a teen's mental health. Having best friends allows teens to be able to confide in someone other than their parents. Not only do they have someone to count on, but it has been shown that friends are more important and influential than parents during this stage.
So there's something else that happens between childhood and adolescence that shifts that dependency for evaluation and approval. And I think a lot of that has to do with just the natural development of becoming a pre-teenager and a teenager, where you're starting to very naturally move away from your family. You're starting to gain independence, and this is very, very biological, right? There's hormones, there's different pathways in our brain being created. There's a lot happening in those years, as you've been going through it the past 4. There's a lot going on, and there's this natural transition. But that doesn't mean it's easy, right, for anyone, family or friends or those going through it. But in that transition, you start to want to identify who you are and where you belong, and your peers become a really important part of that.
Parents' roles must not be ignored in the mediation of that influence. However, it did not emerge as having as strong an impact as expected. During this time of transition, teens begin to search for independence and don't find themselves confiding in their parents as much. Bringing emotional benefits like affection, sympathy, understanding, and support into the relationship, friends and peers aren't always a negative influence and can definitely affect adolescents in a positive manner. Schools can also have a positive influence on teens, along with parents and peers. School might seem like the place where kids go to learn and sit in classrooms, but the truth is that there's a huge social aspect that cannot be ignored. Micro-contexts that influence an individual's experience at school include classrooms, hallway interactions, the cafeteria, and bathrooms. Schools can improve the social construct of their campus by encouraging certain behaviors or having interventions either in a group setting or with individuals to discuss risky behavior and how to deal with peer pressure. Interventions held at school can be effective in educating students and improving their behavior and actions. They can help, but they are more effective when run by other teens. Kids running and representing anti-smoking, drinking, or bullying campaigns have a higher effect and better outcome than if run or represented by adults. Teens are more likely to listen and consider its message because teens trust teens. Interventions can help at school, but teachers and counselors are also super impactful. Professor Katie Taylor, who I interviewed, told me, finding mentors and people that you respect at your school are also helpful in mitigating any negative choices you may make or positive ones. Teachers who help students improve non-cognitive skills, such as self-regulation, raise their grades and likelihood of graduating from high school more than teachers who help them improve their standardized test scores. Parents, peers, friends, and school can both have negative and positive influences on adolescents and teens. Communication within family units is important as it lays a foundation for the child's relationships later in life. Friend groups are a place of acceptance and support, where teens are allowed to discover themselves while searching for independence from their parents. And teachers and other mentors at school can assist adolescents in the long term in making decisions for the future. So I did my career research on a psychologist. They study cognitive, emotional, and social processes and behavior, observing, interpreting, and recording how individuals relate to one another and their environments, and they work with a wide range of people. Some people talk with psychologists about long-term anxiety, depression, or anger, and others talk to psychologists about short-term stress. Some work individually, conducting research, working with clients or patients, and others work as part of a healthcare team, or with schools and universities, hospitals, prisons or correctional facilities, nursing homes, and rehabilitation and long-term care centers. And their median annual pay as of 2019 was $80,000. My four-year plan, I plan on going to one of these four-year universities, preferably Boston College or Notre Dame, and then I plan to graduate and live my life. And this is my biography.